What's up, guys? So it has been a long day, but Alex Murdaugh is on trial for killing his family, for the murder of his family. And there were opening statements today. They finished jury selection. Jury selection has been going on the last couple of days, and now opening statements started. And so we're going to watch some opening statements, and I'll tell you what I think and exactly what's going on. All right, to give you a little background, I'm Colton Richardson. I am a personal injury lawyer now, but I am a former prosecutor, so I prosecuted crimes just like this. And so just want to give some insight into it. And so let's start with opening statements. We're going to skip the jury instructions or jury openings. The judge advises the jurors on certain issues and certain instructions, and then the judge will introduce the state, and the state will give their opening statement. So let's jump right in and watch that.
Court. On the evening of June 7th, 2021, at the defendant's property off Moselle Road in Colton County, his son, Paul Murdaugh, was standing in a small feed room and some kennels they had on the property. About 8:50 p.m., and the defendant over there, Alex Murdaugh, took a 12-gauge shotgun and shot him in the shoulder, in the chest and the shoulder, with buckshot. And the evidence is going to show it was a 1,000,000-to-1 shot. He could have survived that, but after that, another shot went up under his head and did catastrophic damage to his brain and his head. The evidence is going to show that Paul collapsed right outside that feed room. And just moments later, he picked up a .300 Blackout, which is a type of ammunition, but an AR-style rifle. And the evidence is going to show that the family had multiple weapons throughout the property. Picked up that .300 Blackout rifle and opened fire on his wife, Maggie, just feet away near some sheds that used to be a hangar. Pow, pow. 2 shots, abdomen and the leg, and took her down. And after that, there were additional shots.
So I just want to jump in real fast, because what you want to do in opening statement is tell a story. So that's what he's trying to do right here. The best way to share something with someone is through a story. And honestly, that's something that I want to work on, is the art of storytelling. In past, I've not been the best storyteller, and that's definitely something I want to work on. And that's why he's trying to tell a story. He's jumping straight into it. So he's kind of starting with the climax of what happened. And often lawyers will smack tables, bam, bam, as he said. And so it's not uncommon for lawyers to do that.
Including 2 shots to the head that, again, did catastrophic damage and killed her instantly. The evidence is going to show.
And they also have to say the evidence is going to show, because they're just saying what the evidence will show. The defense can object if he doesn't say that, which, in my opinion, I would not object to something like that, unless I was trying to throw the other lawyer off in their opening statement. But for the most part, you don't really object to that if they don't say that.
That neither Paul nor Maggie had any defensive wounds. Neither one of them had any defensive wounds, as if they didn't see a threat coming from their attacker.
So defensive wounds is important in this case, because that could imply that Alex Murdaugh was defending himself. He could plead self-defense, so we'll have to see more, but that's probably why he's mentioning that.
And the evidence is also going to show that both Maggie and Paul were shot at extremely close range. The evidence is going to show it's called stippling. It's almost like a tattoo, that when you get shot very close to a weapon, it leaves marks that the forensic pathologist can see.
That is true.
They were shot at close range, and they did not have defensive wounds.
And I'm sure they'll have an expert to tell what stippling is.
And the evidence is going to show that the defendant, Alec Murdaugh over there, told anyone who would listen that he was never at those kennels. But the evidence is also going to show from these things that every one of us, most of us carry around in our pocket, that he was there. And he was there just minutes before, with Maggie and Paul, just minutes before their cell phones go silent forever and ever. Despite what he told people, I was never at those kennels, the cell phones are going to show otherwise. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Colton Waters. I'm with the Attorney General's office, and I'll be the lead prosecutor. I introduced myself before. With me is David Fernandez, Savannah Gow, John Metters, Don Zelinka, John Conrad, and Johnny James. A lot of lawyers. This is a big case. It's a very complicated case, and that's why there's so many people working on it. Sitting back in the row, we have...
That's important for him to mention because it could look like the state is getting up on Alex Murdaugh, and the state has so many more resources than the defense does, and so that's why he's mentioning that it's a complicated case.
David Owen, who's the lead investigator. We have Lieutenant Charles Gent, who's one of the agents, Special Agent Ryan Kelly, and Special Agent Peter Rudolphy. Some of the agents that are working on the case, as well as Investigator Isaac Toledo, who's working on the case as well. There's some of the witnesses that you'll hear from as we go through this case. The judge talked to you a little bit about, he gives you the law. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the legal concepts before I turn back to those facts. Just remember, though, he's the judge of the law, so you take what he says, but I'm going to explain to you some of the legal issues from my perspective before we talk a little bit more about the evidence in the case. And the first thing is, right before you went to lunch, y'all all took an oath. Everybody in this courtroom who's got involvement in this case takes an oath. You know, attorneys take an oath to become an attorney, take another oath to become a prosecutor, judge takes another oath to become a judge, witnesses take an oath on the stands, law enforcement take oaths to become law enforcement.
This is the boring stuff about you took an oath to do the right thing, to not be biased.
Y'all took an oath as well. And the reason why is that y'all have the most important job in this courtroom. Every one of you raised your hand and said that you would well and truly try this case. And it's the most important job here. Because like the judge said, he's the judge of the law, but y'all are the judge of the facts. Y'all are going to listen to what comes from that witness stand and judge those facts. But you also have to be mindful of that oath. That oath requires you to do that hard job, to make that decision, to call the strike when you see it. It's the same oath. It's just as important as any other oath. This might be the most important thing in this courtroom. The judge mentioned reasonable doubt, and he's exactly right. It's the state's burden to prove this case beyond reasonable doubt. That is a cornerstone of our country. I wouldn't have it any other way.
So yeah, in a criminal case like this, the state has the burden to prove that Alex Murdaugh committed these crimes beyond reasonable doubt. And even if a jury is back in the deliberation room, and they're like, what is beyond a reasonable doubt? They can send a note out asking that question, and every time they'll get a question that you have all the facts and evidence that you need to decide. And none of the lawyers are even given the chance to define what reasonable doubt is. And the judge won't either. So
it's a burden we welcome. It's what we want. It's a system that has been well tested and true. And we take that burden to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. And I want to remind everyone that the emphasis is on reasonable. Okay? It's not any doubt. It is reasonable doubt. Reasonable doubt is often defined, again, listen to the judge how he defines it, but reasonable doubt is a doubt that would cause a reasonable person to hesitate to act. And when you hear the evidence coming from this stand about this particular case, I submit to you, you won't hesitate to act. Again, remember the emphasis is on the reasonable doubt. The judge mentioned the charges, and there are 4 of them. First indictment accuses Alec Murdaugh, to which he's pled not guilty, but it accuses him of murdering Maggie Murdaugh. The second indictment accuses him of murdering Paul Murdaugh.
So he's taking each piece of paper for
the third indictment
dramatic
accuses
effect.
him of possessing a firearm during the commission of a violent crime, that being the murder of Maggie Murdaugh. And the last one accuses him of possessing a firearm during the commission of a violent crime, and that being the murder of Paul Murdaugh. And what does that mean? What is murder? Well, the judge again is going to instruct you but is the unlawful killing of another with malice aforethought. And what is malice? Malice is a mental state. That's ultimately going to be for y'all to determine as to what was going through Alec Murdaugh's.
He honestly didn't. His story didn't last very long. I would have told a much longer story. And a lot of juries wonder about motive as well. Now, the state doesn't have to prove motive at all, but that's something good to throw into the story. If that's what I would do if I was a prosecutor on this case.
When he committed these crimes. What is malice? Malice has often been defined as the intentional doing of a wrongful act without just cause or excuse. It is the intent to inflict an injury under circumstances that the law would presume an evil intent. An evil intent. And when you look at the circumstances of the crime, when you look at what led up to this crime, the evidence is going to show that there was malice aforethought. Aforethought, what does that mean? It means it has to exist at the moment you commit that crime. It doesn't have to be planned. It doesn't have to be planned for any long period of time. It just has to exist a split second before the crime is committed. But when you see this crime and you hear all the circumstances, the evidence is going to show that forethought existed for a while. It existed for a while in the mind of Alec Murdaugh. You're also going to hear about circumstantial evidence. And a lot of times people hear, oh, it's just a circumstantial case. But the law says otherwise. The law says that circumstantial evidence is just as good as direct evidence. And what's the difference between the two? Direct evidence is supposed to be about the storm out here, from what I'm told. Direct evidence is if it's sunny outside, and a witness goes outside and it's sunny, and they come here and they get on that witness stand, and because they saw it raining, they sit on the stand and said, I was just outside and I saw it rain. I saw it raining. That's direct evidence. They actually saw it raining. But to give you an example of what circumstantial evidence is if the witness goes into a room where all the curtains are drawn, and when they go into that room, it's sunny outside and everything's dry. And while they're in that room, they see it darken behind the shades, they hear thunder, they hear the wind blowing, they hear the sound of raindrops.
So there's a difference between direct evidence and circumstantial evidence, and he's doing a good job explaining it. Most prosecutors do that because both direct evidence and circumstantial evidence carry the same weight, and I'm sure he'll mention this.
On the roof, and then they open up the door, and it's not raining, but everything is wet. There's puddles in the driveway, there's puddles in the street, there's puddles in the yard, there's limbs down all over the ground. And then they come in here and say, yeah, it was raining. Didn't actually see it raining, but those circumstances are beyond any reasonable doubt that it was actually raining. Now, I guess it's possible that somebody could have been standing outside the window and beating the drum to sound like thunder and blowing a fan.
Sorry, OBS kicked me out.
And this is crucial for what you're going to do in this particular case, is determine credibility or the believability of witnesses. So it would be your job to look at the evidence, the exhibits in the case, but also the witnesses, and decide if it's truthful, if you believe it, if you can rely on it. And the judge is going to instruct you that you can believe one witness against many or many witnesses against one. You can believe all the witnesses' testimony or part of the witnesses' testimony. It's up to you, first individually and then as a product of your deliberations. And what you're required to do there is just...
A lot of times the state's opening can be boring, and honestly, he needs to go back to telling a story. But there's some things he has to hit on, but I would really have stuck with the story more from the beginning.
Just rely on that good old-fashioned common sense. Does it all fit together? Is it corroborated? Does it fit with what you would expect? Does it fit with what you expect how real people would act? Does it seem real? Does something seem a little off? Does something seem a little off? You're going to see video statements of Alec Murdaugh. You're going to see body-worn camera of him at the scene when law enforcement arrives. And hear what he says. Hear what he says about that night. You're going to hear 3 recorded statements on video that he gave with law enforcement, and you're going to hear how they...
See, he's going back to just telling the jury what they're going to hear. I mean, okay, that's great, but you're going to hear from this person, he's going to say this. You're going to hear from this person, he's going to say this. This was one of my biggest issues with prosecutors and how they gave opening statements. Tell a story. He can tie all this into a story.
How things progress, about what he says, and what he says he did that night. Watch those closely. Watch his expressions. Listen to what he's saying. Listen to what he's not saying. Use that common sense. Does this seem right? Just something seem a little off. Something seem a little off. I mentioned that Maggie was killed with a .300 blackout rifle, an AR-style rifle that chambered in .300 blackout ammunition. And you're going to hear evidence that back in Christmas of 2016, Alec Murdaugh over there bought 2 .300 blackout AR-style rifles. And then not long after that, one of them went missing from Paul's truck. And time went by, and in April of 2018, Alec Murdaugh replaced that rifle and bought another one. 3 total blackout rifles that they had. One of them went missing years ago. and a replacement was bought. You're going to hear evidence that Paul and his friend were using that replacement gun. They were standing right outside the side door to the gun room of the house, and they were sighting it in, firing.
Unfortunately, I can't do too much about the sound. They do not have very good audio in there.
Down into a field, and the cases were ejecting. The cases are the empty shell from a bullet, and they were ejecting out into the flower bed right there. And then there's a range across the street, and they shot it there, and there's cases ejected there as well. And they were shooting that third replacement gun just weeks prior to the murders, prior to June 7th, 2021, when Maggie and Paul were murdered. And you're going to hear forensic evidence that the cases that were found in that flower bed and the cases that were found across the street at that range were ejected out of the same weapon that fired all the cases that were around Maggie's dead body. It killed her. It was a family weapon that killed Maggie Murdaugh. And you're going to hear evidence that of those 3 blackouts that Alec Murdaugh purchased, when law enforcement arrives at the scene on June 7th, 2021, he can only account for one of them. He can only account for one of them. And that replacement gun is nowhere to be found. You're also going to hear evidence that the type of ammunition, the exact brand, the exact model of ammunition that was used to kill Maggie, S&B, 300 blackout ammunition, and 147 grain bullets, that exact ammunition, boxes, empty boxes of that ammunition, is found all over the property. The very same brand and model of ammunition that was used to kill her is found at multiple locations throughout the property. And you're also going to hear evidence, the same thing about the shotgun shells that killed Paul. That federal double-aught buckshot unfired rounds were found on the property, as well as Winchester #2 turkey loads, the 2 rounds.
So one of the things that the defense attorney is doing, and even probably Alex is doing right now, because he was a lawyer, or he still is taking notes on everything that the prosecutor is saying. Because at the closing, they will want to show that, point out, oh, the prosecutor said that he was going to do this. He didn't do that. The prosecutor said he was going to bring this person to testify. He didn't do that. The prosecutor said that he was going to bring in this evidence. He didn't do that. You can't trust the prosecutor. So they're writing over there. They're taking notes. And I wonder how many lawyers are at the bench with them.
The shotgun that killed Paul. Family weapon, same ammunition. That's all the problem. You're also going to hear evidence that about a week after the murders, Mr. Alec Murdaugh's father had died, Mr. Randolph. And about a week after the murders, he shows up early in the morning at his parents' home, where his mother still is in late-stage Alzheimer's, on Alameda in Hampton. It's uncharacteristic for him to show up early, uncharacteristic for him to show up at all like that. And he comes in, and he's carrying something in a blue tarp, and he takes it upstairs. And eventually law enforcement finds out about that. And they go upstairs, and they find a wadded up, very, very large raincoat in a blue color. It looked like a tarp. And you're going to hear evidence that it was coated with gunshot residue on the inside.
The jury will also be watching all the reactions of Alex throughout this trial, and definitely the opening statement. And so it's often important to advise the client to control the emotions, act like you normally would, but don't be on the extreme sides.
You're going to hear other evidence of gunshot residue. You're going to hear that there was gunshot residue on Alec at the scene. You're going to hear the evidence that there was gunshot residue on the seatbelt of the car he was driving. You're going to hear evidence that when law enforcement got to the scene, he had gone and gotten a shotgun, Paul's shotgun, and that Maggie's DNA was on that shotgun. You're going to hear other evidence from DNA, gunshot residue, firearms examiners. There's going to be a lot of forensic evidence in this case. And I'm not going to get into every single bit of it right now, but I will say that a key piece of forensic evidence that you're going to hear in this case is the cell phone network. Alec's cell phone, Maggie's cell phone, Paul's cell phone. You know, this is all amazing technology that most of us carry around in our pockets. It really allows us to do a lot of things. And
he probably doesn't really understand how it works, but he's going to have people who do understand how it works testify.
A lot done. But this cell phone keeps track of who we're talking to, who we're calling, who we're texting, whenever we access apps. And every time you do that, there's a record kept in this phone, unless it's deleted somehow. If you're using certain apps, you can even get GPS information, where you were when you did that, that's stored on these phones. You're going to hear evidence about that. You're going to hear evidence that when you make a call and it pings off the cell towers, the location information can be gathered from that as well. And so it allows an investigation to take this and piece together what someone was doing on a particular day, and not only what they were doing, but who they were interacting with and how they were interacting with them. This is going to be crucial evidence, I'm going to say. You're going to hear that particularly Alec and Paul, but also Maggie, were prolific cell phone users, to the point where Paul's friends even had a nickname for him about his cell phone usage. Before I talk more about that, there's 3 family properties I need to talk about. Okay. The first one I've mentioned is Murdaugh.
Man, I had a case that they downloaded the criminal defendant's cell phone information, like everything off of the cell phone. He was my client, so I was criminal defense at that time. And there was so much information. It takes so long to go through. Unfortunately, I had to go through it to make sure there wasn't anything that the state could use against him, because they had all that information. And if they were going to use it, I wanted to be ready.
Moselle in Colton County. It's called Moselle. It's off Moselle Road, but everybody refers to it as Moselle. And that property is it's a lot of acres. There's a main house on it, and there's a driveway that goes to that main house. But it used to be an airstrip, and there's an airstrip that goes down, and then down the way, just less than a third of a mile away, just a 3-minute walk, 4-minute walk, 45-second drive, is the kennels and the shed that used to be a hangar where Paul and Maggie were murdered. So the main house is just less than a third of a mile away. You can see the kennels from the main house. You can see the main house from the kennels. The family also had a house in Edisto at the beach. And the evidence is going to show that that is where Maggie preferred to stay, particularly in the summer months. She liked the beach. She was not a hunter. She didn't want to be at Moselle. She didn't want to be at the lodge where it was hot and buggy. She liked being in Edisto. And then you're also, I've already mentioned, the house in Alameda, which is where his parents' home. On June 7th, 2021, you're going to hear evidence that his father went into the hospital and the prognosis was not good. And in fact,
does that bother anyone else? The evidence will show. Let me know in the comments, because it drives me nuts.
Died a few days later, and his mother is in late-stage Alzheimer's, and had that house being cared for by a caretaker. You're going to hear from that caretaker.
Mr. Porter,
Yes, sir.
let me pause for a moment. Look at these, just a moment.
Yes, sir. Your Honor.
So there must be something going on. I lost audio, so don't really know what's going on. Guess hopefully we'll find out. Yeah, the audio's still on. Guess they're taking a break. Everyone stands up when the jury goes out. So another thing is, for the defendants, I don't know why they stopped, but for the defendants, opening statement, he can actually save it until later. I wouldn't say never, because there's always exceptions, but 99% of the time, I would not do that. So I hope they take their opening statement now, or right after the state does. But they have the option, so it goes opening statement, plaintiff's opening statement, and then defendant can go for opening statement, but then plaintiff's case in chief. And then if the defendant did not do their opening statement before plaintiff's case in chief, then the defendant can do their opening statement after the state's case in chief and before their case in chief. So I don't know what's going on.
2021.
Oops. So now everyone's coming back in, and they'll turn the audio back on. The jury's coming back in. Turn the audio on.
Proceed.
All right. We were talking about the 3 family properties. Moselle has the main house and the kennels.
And that is frustrating because the prosecutor was in the middle of his opening statement, and I don't know what happened, but something happened, and so he had to get back on track.
/sheds. The main house has a driveway, but the kennels also have a driveway. And the evidence is going to show that that is commonly used as the main driveway. In fact, the mailbox is by the kennel driveway. Driving right past those kennels were Paul and Maggie murdered. I told you that you're going to hear evidence that Maggie did not like being in Moselle as much as she liked Edisto, the beach house. But that, on June 7th, 2021, she came back to Moselle. And the evidence is going to show that she arrived about 8:15, and the evidence is going to show that from the cell phones that Paul was there at the house, at the main house. And Alec Murdaugh himself says that they ate dinner, and the autopsy is going to reflect both Paul and Maggie having similar stomach contents indicating that they recently shared a meal together. About 8:30, about 15 minutes after they arrived, Paul's phone starts moving towards the kennels. You're going to hear evidence again that the defendant said he was never at those kennels, that he was napping after they ate, and he was at the main house and never went there. You're also going to hear evidence about how much Alec used his own cell phone. It would be unusual for him to be anywhere without his cell phone. At 8:44 and 55 seconds, Paul recorded a video. He was down at the kennels because he had been talking to a friend of his. And you're going to hear from this friend because his friend's dog was in the kennels and they thought there was something wrong with the tail. And Paul was recording a video of it to send to his friend. 8:44 and 55 seconds. And on that video, and you'll see that video, and you'll hear from witnesses that identify Paul's voice, Maggie's voice, and Alex's voice. Told anyone who would listen he was never there. At 8:44 and 55 seconds, there's a video. The evidence will show that he was there. He was at the murder scene with the two victims. And more than that, just over 3 minutes later, 8:49 and 1 second, Paul's phone locks forever. He never reads another text. He never sends another text. He doesn't answer calls. 3 minutes after that video has the defendant at the murder scene with the two victims, Paul's phone goes silent forever. And in fact, another communication comes into the very friend that he was talking to the dog at 8:49 and 35 seconds, just 35 seconds later, and he doesn't answer. He never answers another thing forever now. And on top of that, Maggie's phone locks at 8:49 and 31 seconds, around that same time, and she never answers another text, never sends another text, never makes another phone call, never receives another phone call. 3 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. 3 minutes after a video shows he's at the scene with the victims, and he told everybody he was never there. Credibility, ladies and gentlemen. Credibility. So what happens after that? Well, you'll hear evidence that Alex's phone was conspicuously, he didn't have a lot of activity from about 8:09 p.m. until 9:02 p.m. And if he was at the kennels, which the evidence will show, why is his phone not with him? Why is it not showing activity? But you will hear that at 9:02, all of a sudden his phone does start to pick up activity. At 9:02, he calls, he starts moving. At 9:04, he calls Maggie's phone. Doesn't answer, of course. Doesn't answer. He calls his father, Randolph, who's in the hospital. Doesn't appear there's an answer there. He calls Maggie again at 9:06. Remember, he's just a third of a mile away. You can see it. At 9:06, she doesn't answer. At 9:06, he turns on his car, the Suburban, and he texts Maggie that he's going, be right back. I'm going to go check on Mom. And he doesn't drive down to the kennels, even though that's where the mailbox is. That's a common place to be. Even though you can see it. He's called his wife 2 times and texted her, and she hasn't responded. But he didn't just drive down there and say, hey, I'm heading. You guys want to go? What's up? What's up? Right there. You can see it. He then drives to Alameda, where his mom is suffering from Alzheimer's. And the caretaker is there. And he starts calling people. He's talking to people. It'll be up to you to decide whether or not he's trying to manufacture an alibi. He gets there to Alameda. You'll hear evidence about whether or not that was usual. You'll hear evidence about how he was acting when he got there. And he's only there for 20 minutes because he's back underway at 9:44. And he makes more phone calls on the way back. Calling friends, calling people who will answer. It'll be up to you to decide whether he's trying to create an alibi. And he gets back to Moselle at 10:01. He calls 911 at 10:06. Listen to that 911 call. Listen to what he says. Listen to what explanations he may offer. You're going to hear that 911 call, but you're also going to see the body-worn camera of the officers who arrived at the scene. The video camera they wear. So
I know the 911 call has been released. I have not listened to it yet, so it'll be interesting hearing that.
it records what they're doing.
And as a prosecutor, I admitted 911 calls all the time. And to authenticate it, which is you have to prove that it's actually the 911 call from this incident. It's not fake. So you would call someone in there and then just play it. It wasn't that difficult. But sometimes it's hearsay. Hearsay is an out-of-court statement offered for the truth of the matter, asserted. So there's 2 prongs. Out-of-court statement, offered for the truth of the matter, asserted. But there are so many exceptions. And one of the things that you can get in court is a statement by a party opponent. In this case, the phone call, the 911 call, was by the defendant, Alex Murdaugh, and so that's a party opponent. So you can bring that in easily.
And you're going to see what he did to Maggie and Paul. It's going to be gruesome. There's no other way around it. It's what he did. You're going to see crime scene photographs. You're going to see the traumatic injuries that were suffered. You're going to hear from a pathologist, a doctor who We'll examine the injuries. It's going to be gruesome. No other way around. On that 911 call, and on the body-worn cameras, pay attention to what he says. Look at how he's acting. But he says within a few minutes of each one of those, he says, this is about the boat case. This is about the boat case. And you're going to hear some of what was going on in Alex Murdaugh's life leading up to that day. Stuff that happened that very day, stuff that was leading up, a perfect storm that was gathering, much like the storms that are coming outside today. Listen for that evidence. Listen to that gathering storm that all came to a head on June 7th, 2021, the day the evidence will show he killed Maggie and Paul. This has been a long, exhaustive investigation. And it's going to be a fairly long trial because it's complicated. It's a journey. There's a lot of aspects to this case. There's a lot of factors to this case. But like,
So I don't know how long they put aside for this trial, but I would expect it to at least last a week based on what I understand right now. At least.
a lot of things that are complicated, and you start to put them all together, piece them together like a puzzle, all of a sudden a picture emerges.
But there's also, I don't know if it's a theory, but so they used to, for example, trucking cases. Trucking cases are more complicated than your average auto accident. There's a lot more that goes into it. Those trials usually lasted at least a week, if not 2 or a few weeks. Now, people try those trucking cases in 3 days because attention span is so small these days. So hopefully they don't put on just unnecessary stuff and they try to wrap it up for the jury, but we'll see.
It's really simple. It's really simple. Once we get to the end of that journey, you have a chance to deliberate. The evidence is going to be such that you're going to reach the inescapable conclusion that Alec murdered Maggie and Paul, that he was the storm, that the storm was coming for them, and the storm arrived on June 7th, 2021, just like the storms that are heading here right now, that they died as a result, beyond any reasonable doubt. Thank you.
So the state is done. Honestly, he could have definitely told a better story, in my opinion. And you already heard me how I have a pet peeve of the evidence will show. I mean, if I was a prosecutor, I don't say that stuff. If the defense objects, then I'll say the evidence will show, just to make them happy so they don't object. Then, after I go on for another minute, I'll stop saying it. But the only thing is, he could have told a better story. I get what's going on. But I did like how he put in like the beyond a reasonable doubt burden, that kind of stuff, kind of in the middle. A lot of people don't touch on that. Some prosecutors don't touch on that until the very end in closing arguments. But it's good to put it in the middle because the things that people remember the most is the beginning and the end. So put it in there and just keep going into the story and make it a part of the story. So now is the opportunity for the defendant to do their opening argument. Again, it's telling a story. It's storytelling. Lawyers are salesmen. They're selling their story for their client or the state to a jury. It's based on facts and evidence, but they're storytellers. They're salesmen or saleswomen. So now, like I mentioned, the defendant has the opportunity to defer, kind of like a defer kick, but they have the opportunity to defer their opening statement until after the prosecution's case in chief, but they should do it now. So let's see.
For the defense.
Please report, Your Honor.
Yep, he's doing it now. Good choice.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my name is Dick Harthugian. And I introduce myself to y'all and our attorneys, the 3 other attorneys, Jim Griffin, Philip Barber, Margaret Fox. It is our honor to represent Alec Murdaugh, or Murdaugh, depending on how you pronounce it. I say it's our honor because I submit to you what you've heard from the...
Also, pet peeve, I submit to you. Let me know in the comments if you even like that phrase. I hate it, but it's culture or tradition or I don't know.
Attorney General as facts are not. They're his theories, his conjecture. Now stand up. This is Alex Murdaugh.
So right here, he's personalizing the client, which is a really good thing to do. I haven't watched this, but I assume he's going to talk about him as a person and make him appealable to the jury.
Alec was the loving father of Paul and the loving husband of Maggie. You're not going to hear a single witness say that their relationship, Maggie and Alec's relationship, was anything other than loving. You're going to hear about how they went to a baseball game the weekend before. You're going to hear about their relationship. You're going to see texts and emails indicating a loving relationship. Paul, the apple of his eye. You're going to see a video somewhere between 7:30 and 8 o'clock the night of the murders, with Paul and Alec riding around looking at some trees they planted. It's a Snapchat that Paul sent to other people because the trees were not planted very well. They were cantilevering over. They're laughing. They're having a good time. That would be about an hour before the Attorney General says he swatted them. When I say he swatted them, when they were swatted, and no question, Paul Murdaugh was shot twice with buckshot, 12-gauge buckshot, once in the chest. And by the way, that shot would indicate it was in the chest and came out under his arm, like somebody that might have been holding up their hands. So when he says no defensive wounds, he perhaps was being held at shotgun. I mean, I can make the same sort of speculation that the Attorney General can, because that's all he's doing is speculating. What we do know is 12-gauge, fairly close range shot to the chest. He must have been turned because it comes out under his arm. There's wadding, if you're familiar with a shotgun, under his arm. The second shot ended up, and there's going to be some question about the direction of that shot, but ended up entering his skull cavity, and the gases from that shot literally exploded his head like a watermelon hit with a sledgehammer. All that was left was the front of his face. Everything else was gone. His brain exploded out of his head, hit the ceiling in the shed, and dropped to his feet. Horrendous, horrible, butchering. So to find Alex Murdaugh guilty of murdering his son, you're going to have to accept that within an hour of having a extraordinarily bonding, you can see it in the Snapchat, that he executes him in a brutal fashion. Not believable. Not believable. Now, Maggie is shot running. There's no defensive wounds because she's shot running, and after she falls to the ground and has one bullet that has hit her and probably traveled up and hit her brain, she's on the ground, and whoever the perpetrator was walked up, took that AR, and put one in the back of her head.
I like how they're showing us two camera angles, one of Alex and one of the attorneys talking, because you can really see what the jury's seeing in Alex Murdaugh's expressions, and you can tell he's distraught right now. Now, you could say he's faking, he's acting, he's whatever, but he does look distraught right now and sad. So,
Executed. Executed. Why? This is going to be interesting because we don't know why. He doesn't know why. He's got theories of this and theories of that, but why?
And the state does not have to prove why, although juries always ask. Let me know if you would want to know why. And it could be circumstantial evidence, but there's in most states, there's a jury instruction that says that the state does not have to prove motive, and usually that's not even an element. Obviously, that's not an element in murder. So,
number one. Number two, what was it in that hour between when he's yucking it up with Paul? And let me say this to you. His record, he was interviewed. He comes home and finds, there's no question about this. They've got telemetry from his car. He left the house at 9:06, returns at 10:01 after seeing his mother who has dementia. Now remember, that day, his father, who is dying, is taken to the hospital. Mom's home alone with the housekeeper. Perfectly reasonable for him to want to go see her. And later than usual, because his father's not there. He's in the hospital. He dies 2 days later. His father dies 2 days later. So the question is, if he leaves at 9:06 and he's back at 10:01, he literally, and he can account, the cars and the cell phone records account for where he was between 9:06 and 10:01. Now the cell phone records, and you're going to hear this from their own experts, are incomplete. They're incomplete. And we're to submit, one of the reasons they're incomplete, and by the way, how do they find Maggie's phone? Maggie's phone was thrown out on the side of the road about a quarter of a mile away from, a little bit more, maybe a half a mile, from the Moselle property, thrown out on the side of the road.
I wonder if they fingerprinted it.
They found it by using Find My iPhone. And the way they did that, they had to open it or have access. Who gave them the code to open the phone? Al Murdaugh. And it's not destroyed, it's just thrown on the side of the phone. What you're also going to see is that Alec Murdaugh was calling that phone at 9:06. As he leaves the house, he did call her twice and texted her. And we also know that at 9:06, as he cranked his car, as the cell phone records show that, as the telemetry data shows the cell phone linking up with the car, that phone is being thrown on the side of the road almost a half a mile away. Now that is Houdini. That is magic. That is inexplicable. Now, I was making notes while the Attorney General was talking. But let me tell you what is more believable. The night he comes home and finds his wife and son butchered. And when I say butchered, you're going to see these photographs. When I see them now, after having seen them for the last 4 or 5 months, it still shocks me. It still is tough to look at. It still bothers me. And he comes home and finds his son laying in his own blood with his brain laying at his feet, shot to hell. He walks over, he checks to see if there's any life there, although, I mean, he's seeing his brain laying outside his body, he knows there's nothing there. He goes over and tries to get a pulse out of Maggie. No pulse there. Calls 911. I want you to hear that 911 tape. It is a man.
Oops, I'll let him finish.
Man, hysterical, in grief, trying to figure out what's going on. And he tells the 911 operator that he's concerned, and he drives back up to the house. And by the way, you can't see, I've been out there, you can't see the shed.
Let me know if you think Alex is faking it, because I know in the Johnny Depp trial, some people thought, or were saying Amber Heard was faking it and all kinds of stuff. And let me know if you think Alex is faking it as well, or if you think he's being genuine and actually feels distraught and grief in this situation. Just hearing it over again, having to relive it. Uh-oh. It froze again. 1 second. All right. Sorry for those technical difficulties. We'll get back into it.
Trying to figure out what's going on. And he tells the 911 operator that he's concerned, and he drives back up to the house. And by the way, you can't see, I've been out there, you can't see the shed where you might see the top of the shed. There are pine trees between the front porch or the porch on the house and the dog pens. And it's not a third of a mile, maybe by the way the crow flies, but it takes a little bit longer to drive down there. And this is not unusual for them to communicate by cell phone or text, even when they're all on the same property. It's 1,100 acres. Big property. They hunted it. So what I'm trying to say to you is that the Attorney General has given you his view. And again, you can't see the shed. And I'm going to ask the judge at some point during this trial to ask you, the jury, to be able to go to the scene so you can see it. You can understand the court report.
And that doesn't usually happen in a lot of cases, especially smaller, lower profile cases. In this situation, it might, and that would be very exciting. But another thing that's super exciting for the future is VR. I mean, what if you could take your someone take their camera equipment, go to the house or whatever they want them to see, and record everything there? That would be amazing. And then the jurors can stick their VR sets on, be looking around at everything. And take that a step further, what if you could have a VR crime scene? That'd be crazy. Be so nuts. And I think it's going to be very powerful, because a picture paints 1,000 words. A video does way more than that. How many words does a video paint? Imagine what 3D VR would paint. So, exciting things for the future.
You can understand the details. Because the facts are what matter here. The facts. Let me give you another fact. You're going to hear their witnesses explain the catastrophic injuries to Paul. That his head literally exploded. And whoever shot him with that shotgun was probably no more than 3 feet away. Maybe closer, maybe a little further away. His head exploded. You would be covered in blood from head to foot. Head to foot. In blood. They seized his clothes that night. Sled did. And they checked, well, first of all, you're going to see in the videos from the officers that arrived that night, there's no blood on him. They didn't find any blood on him. Sled's testing indicated 12 different places on his shirt and pants. No human blood detected. Period. Okay? You'll see pictures. A white t-shirt, no blood on it. Those are facts. Those aren't theories. Those are facts. Another fact that is, I think, the reason we're here today. When you hear those questions on the videotapes on the night, now he's found his wife and son brutally butchered. You can hear on the 911 tape, he is hysterical. He comes in and out. It's consistent. If any of you have ever, you got to use your experience as part of this deliberation process. Your human experience. Who's ever suffered a catastrophic loss of a friend or a family member? It's numbing. The minute you find out, or if you see them dead, it's numbing. You go into shock. So anything he said that night is in the context of just an hour or two before finding his wife and son butchered. He drove back up to the house while he was on 911 saying, I got to get a gun. Whoever did this might be out there. And he gets a gun. But what's fascinating about that is he gets a 12-gauge shotgun, and he grabs some shells. These people hunt a lot. They have guns everywhere. He grabs some shells. He puts a 16-gauge, a 12-gauge, grabs a 12-gauge shotgun, put a 12-gauge buckshot in, and then he put a 16-gauge buckshot in. That's how shook up he was. Guy hunted all his life, and he put a shell in that he couldn't fire a 16-gauge from a 12-gauge. Makes no sense. He was traumatized. GSR, their own expert at SWED said.
That's good evidence. That is very good evidence. Like, it's not something that he could, oh, this will be good evidence. I'm going to stick the wrong ammo in the gun, even though I've done this many times.
The amount of particles of GSR are consistent with him going up and picking that shotgun up. You want to talk about GSR? Again, if you fired a shotgun twice and a rifle 6 times, you'd be covered in GSR. Those are the facts.
And I'm sure they'll have an expert to talk about that.
That's not his theory. The facts. Now let's talk a little bit about these ARs. Again, you're going to hear testimony. A lot of guns. They had a gun room. You know, I don't live in Colton County. I live in downtown Columbia. Ain't no gun rooms in downtown Columbia. But apparently, if you live on 1,100 acres, if you hunt deer, you hunt whatever they were planting those sunflowers for.
1,100 acres.
You have a lot of guns. The truth is, in 2017, and you'll hear the testimony, that Alec bought 2 blackouts, one for Paul and one for Buster, his other son, sitting out in the audience. And
that's really good. I would have pointed that out earlier. He's pointing out that Alex's other son is sitting in the crowd. And I would just point out that from the beginning. Like, look, Alex's own family is here supporting him. Alex's own son does not think that Alex murdered his son's mom and his son's sibling. So I would have brought that out earlier, and he did it so nonchalant, like he wasn't even planning on doing it. I would have definitely planned on doing it.
Paul had once stolen. He bought another one for Paul. Now, Paul was very irresponsible with guns, cars. He'd leave guns around. He'd leave guns in cars. He oftentimes left guns down at the dog pens, in the feed room. Now, I can't tell you whether he was shot with his own weapon or not, or his mom was shot with his weapon or not. But I can tell you that they weren't shot by Alex. They don't have the guns. There's no way to tell conclusively without having the weapons what weapons those were fired by, and we'll be talking a little bit with the SWED experts about that. The sort of overarching issue here is why murder on June 7th, 2021, why is it September of 2022 before they charge him? And I'll tell you what happened that night, and this is a problem. He's questioned, and the questioning is pretty aggressive. You'll hear it. He's traumatized. They suspect him. They show up, he's got a shotgun. They suspect him. And the next morning, 2 people found butchered here in Colton County, Moselle Road. The police announced, don't worry, there's no danger to y'all. There's nobody out there that could pose a danger to you. Because you see, they decided that night he did it. Without forensics, without cell phones, without any of that. And they've been pounding that square peg in the round hole for the last, since June of 2021. Resulting in charges in September of 22. And so, if he felt, and he did, and you'll hear it, the accusatory fashion he's being interviewed in, he may not have dealt all the facts. But by the way, whether he'd been down to the dog pens that night or not, really doesn't matter. Really doesn't matter. Because you're going to see cell phone activity that would be, let me put it to you this way. Paul's phone, 850. Maggie's phone, later than that, 854, clearly, is still being used. At 9:06, he's up at the house getting in the car, cranking it up to drive over and see his mom. He says, a few hundred yards away, it's a bit further than that. But the point of the matter is, he would have had to have executed both of them, got back up to the house, got the bloody clothes off. And by the way, they seized his clothes on that night. They've never searched his house for any other clothes that we know of. Although that night, he gave permission and they got a search warrant. Go to my house. Go look through everything. Where are the bloody clothes? Where are the bloody clothes? And of course, I would tell you that they woven this story together because they want everything to be consistent. What's important about that is the judge, and by the way, there's no eyewitness. There's no forensics tying him to the murder. When I say forensics, fingerprints, blood, whatever, tying him to shooting anybody that night. The cell phone records would indicate he would have had less than 10 minutes.
Sounds like all the state has is evidence on the phone. We'll see, though.
To kill him, get up to the house, get in the car and crank it up. Maybe cover.
And that's probably why this prosecution, the state, relied so much on explaining what circumstantial evidence is, because they don't have any direct evidence.
In blood. Now, if they think he was beginning to establish an alibi, there's no evidence of that. The evidence is consistent with him seeing them earlier at the dog pen. And by the way, that audio they have of him and Maggie, they were talking about one of the dogs killing a chicken. And they were debating whether it was a guinea hen or a chicken. No animosity. Very normal discussion. Paul's very happy. And we know that Paul, after that, is texting back and forth with the girl about going to the movies. Nobody's down there threatening him. Daddy's not pulling out a shotgun and killing him. For, 10 minutes after that, he's texting this girl. So, big question. One shooter or two? Two guns, shotgun and an AR. And by the way, Maggie has no defensive wounds because she's running. What's she running from? And could you shoot? Typically, she had a little shed right, probably 150 feet from the feed room on the other side of the wall. Perhaps she heard the shotgun blast and came around and saw somebody, or two people, and whoever it was opened up. Was there enough time to kill Paul and then find the AR and then ambush Maggie? Much more likely there were two people, but again, we don't have to prove anything. Let me sort of share the framework in which you should examine this. You have agreed to follow the law, and here's the law. Here is the law. He didn't do it. He is presumed innocent. As you sit there right now, when you...
That is true, and the jury will get a instruction from the judge at the end of the trial saying that the defendant is presumed innocent. So,
look at him, you have to believe he is innocent. He didn't do it. Now, let me tell you that.
And if they don't believe that he is innocent right now, he's presumed innocent, then they shouldn't even be on the jury right now.
That's so difficult to do. I get it. And the way maybe the best way to explain it is this. This morning or yesterday, nobody really reads newspapers anymore, but if you're reading the newspaper, looking at the internet, and you read the police had arrested somebody for some heinous crime, the natural inclination of everybody, all of y'all, is to say, thank God they caught him. Or thank God that person is in custody. And you did something that's so natural. We all do it. You presumed the police had arrested the person that committed the crime. You presumed him or her guilty. That is the natural thing to do. And you know what? That's fine for you to do. Any other day except today. Because you took an oath to follow the law. And the law is, he is innocent. He's presumed innocent. That is your presumption. Your mental framework is, he didn't do it. They've got to prove it to me beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, what's even more difficult, and this isn't a contest, this isn't a game, this isn't who wins and who loses. This is about justice. Oliver Wendell Holmes, one of the justices of the Supreme Court, once said, jury duty is the highest duty a citizen can perform for their country in peacetime. Because you are protecting us from them, from the state, from the government.
I like the last phrase too, during peacetime.
Foundation of our Constitution is that the individual has a right to be presumed innocent, has a right to a jury trial, has a right to have his or her peers sit in judgment of it. That's you. And the framework is you presume him innocent, and you cannot convict him until the state proves to you beyond a reasonable doubt of his guilt. And a reasonable doubt is the kind of doubt which would cause an ordinary person to hesitate to act in the more important decisions in their life. Now, what makes this even more complicated is there's no direct evidence. There's no eyewitness. There's no camera. There's no fingerprints.
So he says right there, there's no direct evidence, and that would be very interesting. And so the state's really relying all on circumstantial evidence, which I've done in there's been many prosecutors that have done before, and especially in a difficult case. So we'll see what circumstantial evidence there is.
There's no forensics tying him to the crime. None. None. I say that without any fear of contradiction whatsoever. None. And what the judge is going to tell you is, to the extent the state relies on circumstantial evidence, the circumstances must be consistent with each other, and when taken together, point conclusively to the guilt of the accused beyond a reasonable doubt. If these circumstances merely portray the defendant's behavior as suspicious, the proof has failed. Now, this smoke they created is about suspicion.
Usually they don't really talk about that until the closing, but apparently it's very important in this case. So they're talking about it in the opening and prepping the jury for that.
If you show up at the scene and you got the wife, and the wife especially dead, and the guy's got a shotgun, you know, it's pretty logical for the cops to jump to a conclusion. He did it. And the problem is that as they came to that conclusion, they have pounded that square peg in the round hole, and you're going to hear about it. They've ignored some witnesses. For instance, that blue tarp showed up with a blue tarp. That witness who said he showed up with a blue tarp was shown a blue rain jacket that he talked about. Said, that's not it. That's not what he brought here that morning. I talked to her. She said, no, it was a blue tarp. And what was it?
I couldn't hear the objection, but it sounded like it was sustained.
Objection sustained. You may proceed.
And he objected again, and it was sustained.
I would tell you that the testimony you're going to hear is inconsistent with you.
And so now he says, the testimony that you're going to hear. And so you just let the other side object to that. Let them be petty like that.
Attorney General represented to you, based on interviews done by people other than me. So, what I'm telling you is this, that as you sit here and listen, every time there's a witness that takes that witness stand that the state's put up there, you see, you judge the credibility, whether to believe a witness or not believe a witness, whether to believe one witness against many, many against one. You're going to have to evaluate the testimony you hear from this witness stand with a critical eye. Critical eye. If you've got uncontested scientific evidence, you accept it. I've got no problem with that. These cell phone records you keep talking about, I would say you are not necessarily accurate to the extent they're lying. I will also tell you that there's going to be a bunch of people, and I've been promised something or threatened with something, that may take the witness stand and say something. But I tell you what they're not going to say. They're not going to say they saw him kill him. They're not going to say that they were involved in it. They're not going to say anything that would give you a comfort level in their testimony. Now, all of you have indicated that you will follow the law. And I say this one last time. He didn't do it. He didn't kill Butcher, his son and wife. And you need to put from your mind any suggestion that he did. You've been picked because you said you could be fair. You were picked because you said you could follow the law. You were picked because Alec Murdaugh believes that you can.
So right here he's saying, you promised you would be fair, and you better abide by that.
Be fair. Now, if during this process over the next however long we're here, I say something or do something, which most certainly based on my career, I will do, that irritates you or angers you. Sometimes I'm a little rough. Don't hold that against Alec. Hold it against me. If I say something that offends you in some way, don't hold that against Alec. Hold it against me. Remember, as you sit there right now.
And that's important to say because you don't want him objecting and the jury taking it against the defendant or him to be irritating the jury and them to hold that against Alex. So it's good that he said that.
In your mind, he didn't do it. He is innocent. He would require a verdict of not guilty from you. That's the law. That's your oath. Thank you.
So there's the opening statements by both parties, and I assume that they'll start testimony tomorrow, usually if it ends late in the day like it did today. Even if it's close to late in the day, the judge would rather start fresh in the morning. And so that's what they're going to do tomorrow. If I were either of them, I would have definitely told a better story. Stories are the best way to communicate, in my opinion. And I didn't really get a great story from either of them. So that's one thing that I would definitely have done a little differently. But obviously they've done this a lot. So there's the opening statements. Let me know in the comments what you think is going to happen. I tried to do live stream, to be honest, but I did something to StreamYard, and it totally was like, you have to wait 24 hours. So it looks like I'm not streaming for 24 hours. So but let me know what you think in the comments. What is going to happen? If you think, was Alex's emotions consistent? Did they look real? What do you think of the prosecutor's opening statement? What do you think of the defense attorney's opening statement? Let me know in the comments, and I'm going to keep up with this, family permitting and work permitting. So we'll see what happens the rest of the trial. See you next time.